of God, who is grace and love and communion. Amen. Please be seated. Those of you who know me know that I really love mystery novels. I love thrillers. I love good spy stories. I love stories about adventure and danger where I can read them comfortably on the big brown couch in front of the fireplace, surrounded by my orange pets. I love them. Not a big fan of memoirs, to be honest, but this week I did read a memoir, and when I say read, I meant I sat down and inhaled it as much as I could in one gulp, because it reads like a spy story. Ronan Farrow just published his memoir of breaking the Harvey Weinstein story in the book Catch and Kill. And I recommend it to you, but with a caveat, you should block out everything else you've got going until you finish it, because it is the kind of book you cannot put down once you start it. In this book, he details what it was like to try and break a story that starts from a rumor with dedicated, long-form journalism and interviews. He was working for a here unnamed large network and continued to encounter a producer who, in the words of Jesus, seemed to have no fear of God and no respect for people. A producer who is not a producer, sort of like a judge who is not a judge. And he encountered lies, and he encountered all kinds of difficulty, including being followed by a kind of a private security spy firm made up entirely of former Mossad agents. The story reads like any good detective thriller. It was a great book. One of my favorite parts, though, happens at the very end, and this is pretty well known, in the epilogue, where Ronan Farrow proposes to his longtime partner, Jonathan, in the manuscript. He gave the manuscript to his partner and he said, read this, read it very carefully. You have to read it to the end, read it closely. And you know how you can do in some documents where you can make a correction or an edit? He wrote, marriage, what do you think? And then his partner responded, sure, in the comment section. It's my favorite story of proposal so far, a proposal by manuscript. But of his partner, Jonathan says, of his partner Ronan, Jonathan says, he was indefatigable. Indefatigable. He would spend hours talking to sources. And his sources, of course, were women who had been assaulted by some of the most powerful men in America. Women whose stories had been denied over and over again. Women whose careers had been shattered because of their experiences. Not just their careers, but as anyone who's been a victim of that kind of assault knows, their whole lives. So when Ronan Farrow continues on this journey where it becomes uncertain, where he is fired from his job, and where he's beginning to experience a level of personal danger, what keeps him going is that he is holding the stories of these women, that he is the one that they have trusted to tell and to bring the truth to light. He did not lose heart. He did not lose heart. He was indefatigable. Nothing could stop him. For me, in this morning's gospel, I hear Jesus giving two different commands. The first is to pray always, and the second is to not lose heart. I think that there's something for us in both of those commands. Let's start with not lose heart, which is where we started with Catch and Kill, which is where Jesus starts in the gospel. The gospel says, and in our kind of tame NRSV translation, it says that a certain widow came after this judge who's not very much of a judge, is he? He's got no respect for the law, he's got no respect for people. You kind of wonder what he's doing sitting up on that seat. Makes me think that this is a judge who sort of represents a broken system, where people have power, but not responsibility. People have authority, but not concern for why. And yet there is a widow. Now, a widow in this culture is someone who doesn't have power, who doesn't have authority, who can't own her own property. A widow who is someone who is alone. I think for those of us who have experienced that level of loss, we can relate to this. And yet, she keeps, in our translation, coming after the judge, but in the Greek, the verb is more like she keeps boxing with him. Now, I don't watch boxing, but I have seen it enough to know that boxing is the most intimate form of combat. That with boxing, like wrestling, you keep coming at them and coming at them. That you have to stay locked in with your opponent. That there is a certain amount of deep physical contact. Boxing is not like shooting. It's not like something like that where you can be far away. You are up close. And the best boxers, as I understand it, are tenacious, pugnacious, will not let go. Tenacious, a word that means to grab onto, like with your fingers, and hang on for dear life. This widow is someone who society says doesn't have power, doesn't have authority, keeps coming after this judge who is not a judge, with tenacity, with pugnacity. I've got my pug socks on this morning to remind me. What a great story. And just through sheer perseverance, she prevails. I like these parables from Jesus because they're not usually about one thing. They don't just have one simple pat answer, and thus it was that this was this. I like these stories because they're like any good story, they work on different levels. And I think that Jesus is telling this story on two different levels. And I believe with my whole heart that Jesus is saying that justice is worth fighting for. That can feel like a tall order. But like Rhoda and Pharaoh, telling the stories of the women who were harmed by powerful people, justice was worth fighting for, because justice isn't an abstract concept that happens for people out there somewhere. Justice is an embodied physical reality. And if you're living in an unjust system, in an unjust world, you know exactly what that means. But justice happens in the real physical world, and injustice just the same. And what is Jesus for us, if not someone who inhabits the real physical world? What's the incarnation all about? The God with skin on. Jesus is deeply concerned about how we live our lives in the real world. But there's the other command that he gives, to pray always. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I somehow acquired this idea about who God is that looks a little bit like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel painting, the big, like, full head of white hair with a beard. God really had it going on for a guy of his age, you know? And he's reaching out the finger to touch Adam, and he's on this sort of cloud throne. And that image has been very persistent for me, despite my best efforts to change when I think of what a picture of God looks like. That picture keeps coming up. I don't think that's always for the best, really. So sometimes when I think about this parable in terms of praying always, it's hard not to summon that image of the big cloud throne God, meting out justice, working through the heavenly hall of merits. Have I earned my grace? Have I earned God's favor? Do I have too many demerits to make that worthwhile? What about my good deeds? Did I put enough in the T-chart category of Tuesday did good stuff and Tuesday did bad stuff, and I still get what I asked for in prayer? I don't think that's how any of this works. I don't think that's how any of this works at all. And yet, sometimes, even when I feel that I've been very faithful, I'm not getting the goods. I'm not getting the response that I want, the response that I need. Jesus, I think, gets that too. forget that while he was on the cross, he too did not get the response that he wanted. My God, why have you forsaken me? It feels especially true when we're out there on the cross with him, and whatever is going on in our own lives. Grief, health problems, relationships that just won't coalesce, jobs that are frustrating. Where are you, God? Get down here and fix this. It would be easy to give up. It would be easy to check it off. Now, when I was a kid, like 8th grade, someone told me that it would be a good idea if I took a home ec class. It was not a good idea. And we did a sewing project. And so being myself and, having ambition that outstrips skill in all things, I took on a project because I wanted to make a stuffed animal. And so I took on this project of making a little stuffed bunny. So far, so good. Pattern looked okay. And I went to the fabric store and I picked out the plushest, longest fake fur that I could find to make this bunny. With all the experience that it took to sew an apron before, this was my next project. So you can imagine the stream of tears and crying and anger and frustration and yelling and broken needles and threads through a machine. And my stepmom finally had to intervene at a certain point, if just to protect the sanctity of the Bernina and help me get this thing done. Believe me, I wanted to take that little sad bunny body and throw it in the garbage. I was frustrated. Sometimes in my life of faith, I will be honest, I feel that frustrated. I want to take the whole thing and just throw it in the garbage. And Jesus says, pray always and don't lose heart. We are called to keep wrestling, to keep at it, to keep boxing. Our faith shouldn't be one where we are passively sitting and waiting for God, just sitting here quietly. It's okay, God. It's all right with you. No. Our faith is one where we are invited to have a vital relationship with God, an intimate relationship with God. And that doesn't mean that it's all sunshine and roses. Because in real relationships, you're going to struggle. There's going to be a tussle. If we were reading the other Old Testament reading assigned for this morning from the lectionary, we would read about the patriarch Jacob from Genesis, who wrestles with an angel. All night he wrestles, the text says. He wrestles so hard that he puts out his hip, and he walks with a limp from then on. But he won't let go. And what does he say to the angel? Give me a blessing. I won't let go until you give me a blessing. Rather than chucking the whole thing in the trash, I think what Jesus is saying is this is going to be hard. God's time is very different from your time. And you keep at it. You keep wrestling. That our faith is not a passive, nice faith. Our faith is active. Our faith requires that we keep going, that we grapple with it. Our God is not some disinterested sky God up there, but rather a God with flesh on, a God that we can engage with in a real way. The last thing I want to say is that each of us are called to do this work on our own. We're invited to practice. I was telling the story in the Episcopal 101 class this morning that when I was an undergraduate, the main thing we were told to do over and over was go to the practice room. I hated going to the practice room. The practice room is where that person in the mirror was who had a terrible voice and looked awful, and I would just be confronted over and over again with how great I wasn't. The practice room was a torture chamber. But I got some good advice from a friend of mine who said, you don't have to even practice. Just go in the room and sit there for 10 minutes. Just sit there on the piano bench, 10 minutes, and then leave. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And so I would go and sit on the piano bench, 1 minute, 2 minutes, start playing the keys, start humming. 2 hours later, I would come out of there and something would have happened. Sometimes wrestling with God just looks a lot like showing up, just walking through the door, making the time. Our lives of prayer sometimes are not what we hope they'll be. And I think it's okay to tell God that. I think it's okay to say, I've showed up. I need you to show up too. Our faith should be vibrant. Our faith should be active. We are invited to have full contact in our